Hawking has a colleague who looked at the event horizon of the black hole. Do you know what I'm talking about? You know what a black hole is, at any rate. If you could travel towards a black hole, not yet possible to do, if you could, in theory, the event horizon is the point at which the black hole is pulling everything into itself. So over into the black hole goes light itself. It's so strong it can pull light back into itself. It's really awe-inspiring. A lot more, say, than a crowd of pigs infested by devils running down a hill into the sea, which is a piece of sorcery and cheap magic of the sort that shouldn't impress any thinking person. Think about a black hole instead.
It's not an either-or thing. It's not as though by believing that Jesus did a miracle with the Gadarene swine, that I'm thereby prohibited from believing that there are marvels to be seen through the Hubble telescope. I'm not forced to choose one or the other. I believe that marvels occur on the grand cosmic scale, and marvels occur at levels much smaller than what occurred with the Gadarene swine. So just God is a macrocosmic God, and God is a microcosmic God. He speaks in the great things, and he speaks in the little things. The difficulty here, one other thing about this, when you think about crossing over the event horizon into a black hole, and you get to the point where you see the future and the past at the same time, or you think about quantum mechanics and things traveling like a particle and arriving like a wave, or vice versa, or the same thing, they're both at the same time, that sort of thing. The thing that astonishes me when I read physicists, particularly atheistic fellows who are evoking a sense of wonder out of their descriptions of these sorts of things, and you heard Christopher just do it, they then turn around and say that they have objections to the doctrine of the Holy Trinity because they can't make sense of it. Does it make sense to you that you could see the past and the future at the same time, provided you were headed toward a big black hole of nothing? Would you sketch that for me on the blackboard, please? Oh, of course.
That could be done. The Trinity can't be done in that way.
Ah, sure. I had a triangle and a circle. So the point.
Have it your way.
Hello and welcome to the Reformation Red Pill Podcast, brought to you by the Forge Press and now a part of the Fight, Laugh, Feast Network.
I don't know why you're clapping. I'm talking about you.
My name is Joshua Haymes, and today we have a very, very, very special episode for you guys. Of course, as usual, today I will be reacting to and providing commentary on a rather famous debate between atheist Christopher Hitchens and Christian pastor Douglas Wilson. But before we jump into this debate, please consider just demolishing that like button. I don't even want to see it existing by the time you're done with it. And subscribe so you don't miss out on any of our content. And if you want to join our Discord community or to get some sweet, sweet merch, or maybe you just want to support the work we're doing here at Reformation Red Pill, you can join our club membership. Knox tier specifically is our best deal. You get the most bang for your buck, absolutely. And you get to help us here at Reformation Red Pill keep the lights on. And so today, we are going to be seeing presuppositional apologetics in action. And my reason for putting this particular debate in front of you is that I want all of us, all of you, to be equipped, or as 1 Peter 3:15 says, prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for the reason for the hope that is in you, and to do it with gentleness and respect. And so, in the spirit of 1 Peter 3:15, let's jump into this debate.
One of the things that we've been talking about, and each element of this triad will come up probably every time Christopher and I talk. It did in New York, and it will probably certainly do so tonight, and then on to D.C., is the ancient triad of truth, goodness, and beauty. Truth, goodness, and beauty. One of the things I wanted to focus on this evening was beauty, but not because the other two things are irrelevant, and those certainly can come up in the questions or in our exchanges. But the way I want to argue, the way I want to talk about this, is that the Bible and God is not something that I'm interested in reasoning my way to. I don't believe that Christopher and I could find common ground, agree upon the rules of historical investigation, or agree upon the laws of logic, and then reason our way to God. There are many Christian apologists who believe that is possible to do. I don't reject evidences, but I'm not an evidentialist. I believe that evidences have their place in apologetics, but I don't believe that they should be foundational. What I'm interested in doing is asking about the preconditions for any sort of statement. So in a debate, I think it's necessary to do two things for those who are observing the debate. What is necessary to do is not only look at what the person is saying, what argument is coming out of him, what is he articulating, but also take a look at his feet. What is he standing on in order to make that sort of statement? In other words, I would like to invite you to ask not only to hear what Christopher says about what he believes about the nature of the world, but then ask yourself, well, if he's correct and the world really is that way, would he be able to make that statement? All right, does any sort of statement follow that's rationally coherent from his assumption of the way the world is? Put simply, if the universe is time and chance acting on matter, if the universe, if the cosmos is simply matter in motion, then everything I think, feel, respond to is also matter in motion. If the universe, if the cosmos is matter in motion, then this table is matter in motion, and what's going on in my head is matter in motion.
With luck.
What's that?
With any luck.
With any luck, yes. Quite. If you have the illustration I've used before, and I will continue to use it until I see or hear a satisfactory response. If we were to take 2 bottles of pop, Mountain Dew, Dr. Pepper, and shake them up and put them on the table here, and they were both fizzing over, it wouldn't occur to we couldn't fill the auditorium, first off, and it wouldn't occur to anybody who happened to wander through the auditorium to ask which one of the bottles of pop was winning the debate. They are not debating, they are simply fizzing. They are simply matter in motion. That's all it is a chemical reaction. Now, if there is no God, if the universe is simply matter in motion, if the universe is simply a series of chemical reactions, and we have in our bodies a series of chemical reactions, then we have no reason for believing our thoughts to be true. And that means that we have no reason for believing that our thoughts are chemical reactions. The whole thing collapses on itself. Now that argument, I think, applies to each one of these things that I'm talking about. It applies to our reasoning capacity. If the universe is simply ultimate chaos, then why would we trust logic? If the universe is ultimate chaos, then what is the basis for morality, goodness? And of interest to me tonight, if there is no God, then how can we possibly say that anything is beautiful or lovely, objectively beautiful or lovely? You can't say anything is objectively true, you can't say anything is objectively good, and you can't say that anything is objectively beautiful. You can tell us what your preferences are, but that's what they are, only preferences. Now, in the short time that we've been doing this tour together, Christopher and I have found out that we have a number of common interests, literature and poetry among them, and the writings of P.G. Wodehouse at the right near the top. We had a good time at lunch yesterday quoting sections out of Wodehouse's work. Wodehouse was a master writer. He was a master of metaphor. He was good at it. But what does that mean in an atheistic universe? What does it mean to say someone is good at it? If someone is good at ballet, or good at painting, or good at composing concertos, why is that any different from any other concatenation of atoms going on in some other quadrant of the universe? Why do we point to one part of this this little riot of matter and say that's lovely, that's beautiful, that's good, that should be published, let it go. That should be bought by the art gallery. That should be accepted and promoted and so forth. And this over here is sentimental kitsch. This over here is no good. This over here is not worth the time of day. Well, atheists, of course, make value judgments all the time. They make moral judgments, they make truth claims, and they make aesthetic observations. Christopher is a very gifted writer. He's good at what he does. He's a craftsman. And so I'm not disputing whether or not Christopher seeks to be a good person, or seeks to be a rational person, or seeks to be a wordsmith. I know that he seeks all of those. What I'm looking for is warrant. What is the warrant for that? What is the accounting that you can give of that? Is it possible to say the universe is governed by no God, the universe is meaningless, the universe has no teleology, the universe is going nowhere, but this is lovely, this is beautiful, this is a masterwork? And I don't believe that that's possible to sustain. I don't believe you can maintain objective standards rooted outside our subjective experience in any one of these three areas, whether it's truth, goodness, or beauty. That being the case, what I'd like to do is sort of anticipate an objection and then wrap up. The anticipated objection is one that I've seen an atheist make, that this argument, since the universe is meaningless, any subset of it is meaningless, and rejected as the fallacy of division. The fallacy of division is an informal logical fallacy, not a formal structural fallacy, but an informal logical fallacy, which says that if something is true of the whole, that it must be true of the part. And so the atheist could object, just because the universe is meaningless doesn't mean that this little part of it is meaningless. Well, as an informal fallacy, sometimes informal fallacies are true. Sometimes they are accurate observations, other times they are not. So, for example, if I were to say the Pacific Ocean is made up of salt water, then it follows that this bucket of water from the Pacific Ocean is also salt water. What's true of the whole is true of the part. It's a fallacy when I say that this the Pacific Ocean taken in its entirety is heavy, therefore a thimble full of water from the Pacific Ocean must also be heavy. No, it's light. That's the fallacy of division in action. So the question is, does the meaninglessness of the universe translate down to the particulars like salt water does with the Pacific Ocean? I believe so. I believe that if there's no teleology, if there's no point, if there's no direction, then that fact haunts you down into all of your endeavors, all of your pursuits, especially concerning your aesthetic pursuits. Anyone who thinks that the history of philosophy has not had an impact on the production of art in our culture, I think is simply not paying attention. It does translate, and it has, I believe, genuinely aesthetic damaging effects. So, thank you. I'll leave it there.
So Doug Wilson is opening up this debate as a presuppositionalist. So the presuppositionalist moves the debate from the accidents to the essence, from the fruit to the root of the matter, from what do you think about an issue to how are you even able to think about an issue? On what basis can you make any truth claims whatsoever? Pastor Wilson here frames the discussion in terms of what is called the three transcendent virtues, namely goodness, truth, and beauty. In a debate or a discussion, the presuppositionalist is attempting to demonstrate that apart from God, truth, goodness, and beauty cannot exist. And therefore, since truth and goodness and beauty for that matter cannot exist within an atheistic worldview, the atheist, therefore, has no business lecturing anyone with regard to truth, goodness, or beauty, since according to their own worldview, objective truth cannot exist. So let's keep watching and find out whether or not Pastor Wilson can successfully demonstrate the logical bankruptcy of the atheistic worldview.
Well said. My fellow Americans. It's taken me a long time to get to say that. By the way, does anyone here have the nerve to put up their hand and say they know why it's called the World Series? There's always one smart ass. You be quiet for a second. It took me 25 years. I immigrated here 27 years ago. Why do they call it the World Series? It's a game no one else plays. Maybe Dominica, perhaps Haiti, Japan. Okay, Canada, but come on, World Series? What? And it was interesting. Every American I knew said, why wouldn't it be called the World Series? It's our game. You will in a second see where I'm going with this. But I wouldn't accept it. No, there must be a reason why it's got that name. And I chased it down. The contest, the event, was sponsored by a newspaper called the New York World. Now defunct. Everything's gone about the New York World. No one remembers it, no one reads it. But the World Series survives as a kind of ghost remnant of this. It could have been called the Post Series, but I don't think Americans would have been so proud of it. I'm only saying, just to begin with, beware of solipsism. As Dr. Oliphant was so kind as to remind you, don't ever think you are the center of the world. Be very careful of assuming that you are the object of a divine design, that there's something special just about being you, that that's all you have to prove. That why wouldn't a person such as yourself have God on their side? Why wouldn't it be? Of course God would care who I slept with, what I ate, what holy day I observed. Why would he not? Surely that's why the heavens are arranged in the starry beauty and array that the form they take. And then you read Hamlet's reflections with Yorick at the side of the grave, and you are forced to wonder if maybe, even though it's a less beautiful thought, it could be that the galaxies are not arranged with you in mind. Well, I've already got ahead of myself by not thanking you for having me here, and for not thanking Dr. Oliphant for his extremely warm and generous introduction. When I first published my polemic against theism, I told my publishers I didn't want the conventional New York tour. I didn't want to go to New York, Washington, Chicago, Berkeley, San Francisco, and so forth. I wanted to go to the South, and I wanted to go to colleges that were devout, and I wanted to ask for a challenge wherever I went. And I have to say I've been very impressed and touched by the willingness of people to accept this challenge and to invite this abusive hospitality into their own. And all I ask in return is that this aisle be permanently named for me. With a large plaque long after I'm gone. All right. The problem of relativism, the problem that Douglas Wilson has been assailing you with, correctly, the problem of saying that really judgment is impossible, that no one value is greater than another, that sub specie aeternitatis, under the eye and scrutiny of heaven, nothing really matters. It doesn't really. Who cares who wins the Second World War? Who cares whether black Americans become full citizens or not? Who minds? Why would we care? Why is that? And is it perhaps something of the aesthetic in ourselves, such as was stated by the great English Romantic poets who did take a side for humanity and for humanism, often, by the way, against theocracy and almost always against religion, when they said, beauty is truth. Truth, beauty, that is all ye know and all ye need to know on earth. Beautiful statement. Once you've heard it, you can't forget it. It ranks to me with another statement made by another great person of the Enlightenment a little earlier, Thomas Jefferson, who says, and once you've heard this, you won't forget it either, I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just. He's talking about slavery. It's a beautiful statement, there's no question about it. It also has a certain equilibrium to it, I think you'll agree. And yet, when you think about it for a moment, if there is a just God, what is the need to tremble? If there's a just God, all our concerns are trivial by comparison. Why would we weep? Why would we care? Why would we mind? A just God trumps any possible anxiety or difficulty or crisis we might have. But if there isn't a just God, and there isn't, because the heavens are empty, then you might have to abolish slavery by yourself and not require the divinity and justice of the sublime and the paradisical to do it for you. You'd have to take responsibility. It isn't beautiful to say, no, I don't want the responsibility, I will refer it upward to a supreme, unchallengeable, I would say tyrannical, because unchallengeable and unchangeable, essentially absolutist, I would go as far as to say totalitarian authority. The things that happen to us in this vale of tears will go on happening to us as they did to our predecessors and as they will to our descendants when we are dust. And these things cannot be avoided, and they cannot be referred upwards and outwards to a dictatorial view.
So Hitchens here is claiming that if there's a just God, what need is there to tremble? If there's a just God, then you might just have to abolish slavery all by yourself. Now, I want to offer two quick responses to Hitchens' claims here. Number one, Hitchens assumes that it would be good news for him if he found out that there was, in fact, a just God out there in the universe. Now, this demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of the Christian faith that he is purportedly arguing against. God's justice is actually bad news for Christopher Hitchens. You see, Hitchens and many atheists want to assume that if God were just, he would only punish the Hitlers and the Stalins and the Mussolinis of the world. But the reality is, if God is truly just, and he is, then divine judgment awaits every single person who violates God's law. That's the first point. The second point, which is really quite simple. Why is slavery an evil that ought to be abolished according to you? By what standard? This is the constant cry of the presuppositional apologist. By what standard? And let's see if Hitchens has a standard that he can appeal to.
Let me give you an example. Let me give you a couple of examples. I wrote a book about the Parthenon. I think most objective people would say it's the most beautiful temple of the ancient world, perhaps the most beautiful temple ever built by human hands. Its extraordinary symmetry and harmony makes it quite different from the other temples that claim to conquer death, because the conquest of death is the first thing the barbarian wants to claim, and all barbarian monarchies want to claim. That's why the pyramids are built, to show that death has no power, we'll outlive it. That's why Babylon was built, that's why Karnak was built. All the great temples of the ancient world, when I visit them, strike me with horror. They're built by slaves. Their building is commissioned by slave owners. It's so obvious that they're built to impress, to oppress, to dominate, to grind people down. The Parthenon is lightness and everybody, and it's a new departure. And though there are terrible things about it, I'll mention some. The cult of Pallas Athena, a fictitious goddess. The Eleusinian mysteries, hocus pocus sprung on the peasantry by Greek priests. The sculpture on the frieze probably shows human sacrifice. We can't be certain of it, but it looks very likely that human sacrifice was going on there. Even though Keats wrote so beautifully about that procession in his own version of truth, beauty, and beauty being truth. But I think the cultural project is this, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, comrades, friends. It's this, the cultural project. Can we rescue, can we separate the beauty, symmetry, harmony, and civilization of pre-Christian, pre-monotheistic, pagan, polytheistic Greece? Can we keep what if that is valuable and useful, and philosophical, and poetic and dramatic, while dumping the supernatural, the superstitious, the cultish, and of course the Athenian genocidal imperialist that sent expeditions to destroy the whole populations of islands and neighboring republics with which it disagreed, or which refused to pay tribute? Yes, I believe it is possible. I believe it is possible in the same sense as I know it's true that even as Verdi wrote his Requiem, he didn't believe in God. He didn't need to believe in God to produce that beautiful music. It isn't true that secularism can't produce a cathedral or an opera. It is true, however, that a secular civilization will have to keep what is valuable of the beauty and symmetry of religious art and devotional architecture, while rejecting the supernatural and the superstitious. You see, the supernatural and the superstitious are not the same as the numinous and the transcendent. I don't come before you, atheist and materialist as I am, as someone who simply says that Douglas Wilson and I are two competing bottles of Dr. Pepper. Nor do I come before you as someone who says I was created out of dust, or as the Quran would say, out of a clot of blood, that I'm an abject serf, that I'm a piece of nothingness fashioned out of garbage by a capricious, tyrannical God. That's an even worse insult. I'd rather be Dr. Pepper than that, I have to tell you.
In 1 Timothy 4:8, the Apostle Paul tells us that physical training is indeed valuable for the Christian life. And while physical fitness is not the most important thing in the Christian life, it is still of great importance, particularly for men. Why? Because God has called you to protect and to provide. Men, you are called to be protectors. Therefore, God is calling you to be strong, spiritually, emotionally, and yes, even physically. Physical fitness is also important because God has called you to provide. Your family needs you to live a long, healthy life. So, get strong and stay fit with Mount Athos. They are a Christian fitness company that uses some of the best natural ingredients. So I've personally been using their supplements for 6 months now, and I'll tell you right now, I am not going back. They are my new supplement brand. So, stop giving your money to pagan fitness brands that can't even tell the difference between men and women. Join Mount Athos in creating the next generation of health, strength, and spiritual vitality. Visit athosperform.com/Reformation. And don't forget to use code Reformation for an exclusive discount today.
Me too.
But now let's contrast the numinous and the transcendent to the superstitious and the supernatural. Francis Collins, my new friend, Christian believer, C.S. Lewis fan, commissioner of the Human Genome Project, great physician, great scientist, great humanitarian. He says, he's a pantheist in effect, I think. He goes on a long hike into the mountains and he comes at one point, I think it's in your home state of Washington, I may be wrong, but I think it's in the Pacific Northwest. He comes on his hike to a point where there's a triune waterfall, a 3-in-1 waterfall falling and yet arrested in its fall because it's frozen. It's a frozen water trinity. Anyone who understands harmony, symmetry, the beauty of nature will understand what Dr. Collins is saying. He says, in his own account, he says, at that point when seeing it, I fell to my knees and I accepted Jesus Christ as my personal Savior. Some of you may have had similar experiences, I don't know. I'm immune to this kind of thing, but I'm not indifferent to it. Where does he get off with such a non sequitur? It is, of course, very beautiful to see a 3-fingered frozen waterfall. What if it had been 4 fingers and not a trinity? Would he not have accepted Jesus Christ as his personal Savior? Did you see the slack-jawed, gaping propaganda of the World Trade Center when everything was all cleared away? At the bottom of the girders, there was a cross standing there. All buildings are built with a crosshatch of steel. It's well known. They go like this, like all windows. It would be amazing if there wasn't a cross there. If it was a star and crescent made out of melted steel, I'd be really impressed. And so would the people who blew up the building and want you all to die. If it had been a Star of David, okay, I'd have been slightly impressed too. Only very slightly, for my mother's sake. Now, let's be serious. This stuff is not true, and it's not beautiful, and it's not symmetrical. It is superstition. It is the way the mind searches for form and will find it if it's looking for it, and looks for symbols, and looks for miracles and revelations where they're not really there, and is terribly easily satisfied by tiny little bits of pseudo-magic. But if you want to be awe-inspired, ladies and gentlemen, and let me just tell you that those of us who do not believe we are divinely created, let alone divinely supervised, are not immune to the idea of awe and beauty and the transcendent. Let me invite you to look for a moment at the pictures taken by the Hubble telescope. Some of you may have done it. If you haven't done it now, or yet, do it soon. The extraordinary revelations of swirling, yet somehow beautiful new galaxies in color and depth and majesty, like nothing I think the human eye has ever seen. Turn away from that if you wish, and gaze at a burning bush in an illiterate desert part of the Middle East and say that that's where revelation comes from. I don't believe you'll be able to do it. Or read a page of Stephen Hawking on the absolute magnificence and consistency and underlying beauty. As Einstein says, the great miracle of physics is there are no miracles. It all carries on, holding together all the time. There are no interruptions in its order. There are no suspensions of it just to please Joshua or just to please some sect or tribe or group. No, it's much, much, much more impressive than that. I know I've talked for a little too long, but I'm going to do this if it kills me. Hawking has a colleague who looked at the event horizon of the black hole. Do you know what I'm talking about? You know what a black hole is, at any rate. If you could travel towards a black hole, not yet possible to do, if you could, in theory, the event horizon is the point at which the black hole is pulling everything into itself. So over into the black hole goes light itself. It's so strong it can pull light back into itself. It's really awe-inspiring. A lot more, say, than a crowd of pigs infested by devils running down a hill into the sea, which is a piece of sorcery and cheap magic of the sort that shouldn't impress any thinking person. Think about a black hole instead. Pulling the light into itself, the event horizon just reorganizing nature. So that if you could get to that lip, the lip of that event horizon, and fall in and go in, you could in theory see the past and the future stretching before and in front of you. You would see time, except you wouldn't have the time to do it, of course, if you were a mere primate, as we are. But Hawking has a colleague who says if he knew he was dying of terminal illness, that's how he'd want to go out, is over the lip of the event horizon. That would be majesty. That would be magnificence. That would be awe-inspiring. That would be apocalyptic. So it's in the natural world, it's in the world of science and the world of innovation and discovery and doubt. We wouldn't have discovered any of these things if we'd taken the religious story for granted to begin with. We would have said we already know enough. We know. God made this. God wants it this way. What's the need for inquiry? We already have all the information we need. The big difference between this side of the house, mine, and the other, is this. I am absolutely certain that I do not know, but that it might be possible to find out, and that doubt and skepticism and innovation and inquiry are the only means by which wonder and beauty and awe and symmetry will be discovered, and beyond those peaks we can yet see, new, more wonderful peaks will rise. Whereas, on the Wilson side of the house, it is said, we already have the certainty. We know that God created us, and we even claim to know his mind and what he wants of us. And I just invite you to open your minds to the possibility that the skeptical and the inquiring and the doubtful will be better than anything that calls itself faith. Because anything that calls itself faith calls itself certainty. And for certainty, I think there is no place in an institute of intellectual mentation and higher education. And I'm very grateful to you all for giving me the chance to say so. Thank you.
Now, let's pause here. Hitchens says that this is awe-inspiring. Now, for those of you who are familiar with Romans 1, Hitchens here becomes the walking embodiment of the wrath of God as outlined for us in Romans chapter 1. And I'll just read that. Romans chapter 1, verse 18. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. Here in this passage, the Apostle Paul makes it clear that according to the Word of God, there is actually no such thing as a true atheist. God has revealed himself. He has made himself plain to them, but they suppress the truth in unrighteousness. The passage goes on to say that the wrath of God takes the form of God giving humanity over to their disordered passions and their foolishness. And the result is that they exchange the truth of God for a lie and worship and serve the creature rather than the Creator. All of the created universe, all of the wonders of the cosmos were always meant to inspire awe and become an occasion for worship. But now, as a result of God's wrath against sin, fallen man worships and serves creation rather than the Creator. Let's keep going.
All right. I believe the drill was to interact for a little bit and then closing statements. I would like to make a couple of quick observations and then ask a few questions. The observation would be, Christopher and I were talking this morning about whether I believed in the miracle of the Gadarene swine that he referred to, and I certainly do. I accept all the miracles of the Bible as described in the Bible. But I mentioned to him the Gadarene swine rule, which is just because a group is in formation, it doesn't mean they know where they're going. The other thing that I would like to point out about that is that it's not an either-or thing. It's not as though by believing that Jesus did a miracle with the Gadarene swine, that I'm thereby prohibited from believing that there are marvels to be seen through the Hubble telescope. It's not. I'm not forced to choose one or the other. I believe that marvels occur on the grand cosmic scale, and marvels occur at levels much smaller than what occurred with the Gadarene swine. So just God is a macrocosmic God, and God is a microcosmic God. He speaks in the great things, and he speaks in the little things. The difficulty here, one other thing about this, when you think about crossing over the event horizon into a black hole, and you get to the point where you see the future and the past at the same time, or you think about quantum mechanics and things traveling like a particle and arriving like a wave, or vice versa, or the same thing, they're both at the same time, that sort of thing. The thing that astonishes me when I read physicists, particularly atheistic fellows who are evoking a sense of wonder out of their descriptions of these sorts of things, and you heard Christopher just do it, they then turn around and say that they have objections to the doctrine of the Holy Trinity because they can't make sense of it. Does it make sense to you that you could see the past and the future at the same time, provided you were headed toward a big black hole of nothing? Would you sketch that for me on the blackboard, please? Well, of course.
That could be done. The Trinity can't be done in that way.
Ah, sure. I had a triangle and a circle. So the point.
Have it your way.
Now, the point is that there are mysteries beyond us. Right? The issue is not whether there are things in the universe that will stagger us and make us go, whoa. The issue is when you reflect on what you think is actually going on, when you reflect on what is actually going on, and you say there's no purpose in this, there's no design behind it, it's just a plain, weird, crazy place, I believe that you have removed the aesthetic element. You've removed the element of intention. It may be big, it may be crazy, it may be wild, it may be chaotic, but it's not lovely. But if it is designed by God, in other words, if all those galaxies that you can see through the Hubble pictures, if all those galaxies, if the Crab Nebula and all of those things were put there on purpose by the triune God of Scripture, then you have not only something that's grand and big in scope, but you have intentionality. You have what I would call artistry. God is a great artist. Now here's the difficulty. When Christopher early in his and this will lead up to my question. Yes. When you began with why would he care? Why would God care? Why should I take a solipsistic approach and assume that God would care who I slept with? Well, if I said why would he care who I, and then I drew a blank, it's not just, it cannot, you could fill it in with more than who I slept with or who I lusted after in my heart. You could fill it in with who I killed, whose family's village I destroyed, whose nation I blew up because I felt like it, whose nation and tribe I enslaved because it just seemed like the thing to do at the time. Christopher said, when we discover that we are not accountable, that we have no court of appeals that goes up to the top with this totalitarian God as Christopher sees him, I see a father, he sees Big Brother, what it boils down to. So I see a loving father, and he sees the eternal surveillance cameras and that kind of thing. And he says, well, if there is no...
And thought crime.
Thought crime, right. And you have... exactly so.
Thought crime. Exactly so. Here, Pastor Wilson communicates a lot with that exactly so. You see, for the Christian, the fact that we live our entire lives coram Deo, that is to say, before the face of God, is actually a great comfort to us. Why? Because he is our Father, and we love him. See, the fact that God knows every single sin that we have ever committed and still loves us and still paid the price for our sins on the cross means that it is a delight to be fully known in the depths of our being by our Heavenly Father. But because Hitchens rejects Christ and therefore rejects God as his Father, he will only know God as judge. We will all meet God. For Christians, we will meet him as Father. For those who have rejected Christ, they will only know him as judge. Notice the term, thought crimes, right? 1984, Hitchens is giving the game away. Here, he is essentially admitting that if there were a being who could judge not only his actions, but could also judge his thoughts, he would stand condemned before that being. Every single human being on the planet commits thought crimes and heart sins every single day. You will either be forgiven by God, your Father, or condemned by God, your judge. And now let's continue.
So you have, you said if there is no God there, we might have to abolish slavery by ourselves, right? And here's my question. Why wouldn't you say we would have to abolish slavery ourselves or not?
Well, indeed, the or not is always pregnant there, just as in your remarks just now about how God might care about more than just who you slept with. I was picking a trivial example. Or, by the way, in what position you did so, or on what holy day. You wanted to make it more...
Or he killed them afterwards.
You wanted to make it more serious and said, what about who I kill? Well, as no one here doesn't know, there are biblical mandates for killing, and indeed for the killing of nations, and for the killing of tribal groups, and for the killing of all their children so that their name be blotted out, and for, in the case of some luckier groups than the Amalekites, keeping only their young women alive, so that, I think for purposes better imagined than described, so that there is a divine mandate for killing. You can be told what to do, and religion is obedience to the divine law. It isn't to say you would behave as an ordinarily moral person would expect to behave with a divine warrant to do so. No. As any Mormon will tell you, if the head of his church tells him to commit a murder, he has to assume that the head of that church knows better than he does, that it might be for a much higher reason.
But why are we having this...
He would do something that no morally sane person would do because he was religious. Now, let us not lose sight of this point, which you have, in our previous discussions, several times conceded. If God wanted you to do it, you wouldn't ask the ordinary moral questions. And we know that there are biblical warrants for slavery and for genocide. And so your point that that religion conforms to ordinarily understood humanitarianism simply falls. That's the first thing.
So my question is this, because I don't see us really disagreeing at this point. I believe that it was okay to kill Amalekites, right? Because it was not okay to not do it because God told them to kill the Amalekites. We would differ on...
Well, there you are. I got you to say it. Okay.
Happy to say it, and didn't get me to say it.
No, I know you get a bang out of saying it.
What I actually get a bang out of is what I'm going to get you to say next. And that is, neither one of us has a problem with killing Amalekites. I don't have a problem with it because God told him to do it. You don't have a problem with it because the universe just doesn't care what happens to Amalekites.
No, actually, that's not true, because what if I was an Amalekite?
Well, you're not the universe.
Well, no, I'm sorry, it still changes everything.
No, it doesn't. Because you're not an Amalekite.
But
They're all dead. They're all dead.
That is what relativism means. You know, don't you, that it actually is true. There are discussions among Israeli rabbis, including Israeli rabbis in the Israeli army, published in Israeli newspapers today, to say, is the commandment to kill the Amalekites applicable to the Palestinian Arabs, Christian and Muslim, or not? Is Amalek still with us? Is he the name of our enemy? Are we still enjoined by God to destroy all non-Jews in the greater Palestine? This stuff goes on.
And if they answer it in the affirmative, you don't mind.
This is why I feel justified in the subtitle of my book, that to no argument does religion add anything that doesn't make it more toxic. Now, we wandered a little from the symmetrical and the beautiful point, didn't we? But perhaps the Gadarene. I did have something, because you challenged me on the Gadarene factor. Yes. If you believe in all these miracles, it's entirely up to you. There are some miracles I wish were true. The first one is the best. So changing water into wine for a wedding works for me, and also shows, I think, a concession by Judeo-Christianity to the influence of Hellenism in the region, which was still quite strong. As you know, the Passover Seder consists really of people lying around on couches, drinking wine, asking questions dialectically in a Socratic manner, bringing the children into the discussion and so forth. That's an admirable tradition on which to base things. And I think not enough of Judaism, and certainly not enough of Christianity, is based on that method. But at least the miracle of Cana shows they knew the importance of wine, and they knew they wouldn't sell their religion without that. But the Gadarene swine worries me. There may be a woman who's possessed by demons and devils. I don't think such a thing could possibly happen. I don't think women are, or anyone is, demonically or diabolically possessed. The Prophet Muhammad believes that our world is surrounded by demons and jinns, that they're around us all the time. Devils are in the dust, are in the air, the wind. Some very primitive animist tribes believe this too. No decent thinking person can believe it. And even if it was to be the case that a woman was possessed by a demon, you can't make the demon go away by making it go and infect a group of pigs in order to make them commit suicide. I mean, in other words, that miracle, if it were true, wouldn't be worth having. It would be a claim that your prophet was a vulgar sorcerer, or was at least trying to impress his followers with vulgar witchcraft and sorcery. I leave that point to you, but to say that's either true or beautiful seems to me to blaspheme both terms quite badly.
Proverbs 13:22 tells us that a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. Well, if you're anything like me, you want to be a good, godly man, a man who provides for his family, a man who wisely stewards the financial resources that God has given him. And man, is that hard to do in today's economy. Now, I have personally spoken with multiple financial advisors, and I want you guys to know that I am personally using Joe Garrissey and his team at Backwards Planning Financial. Maybe you've thought like I have. I wish that I had started investing years ago for my family's financial future. Maybe then, me and my family would be in a better financial position. Listen, it's never too late to start. Joe Garrissey with Backwards Planning Financial works hard to help families achieve their financial goals. He's a Christian who works with one of the largest and most trusted financial service companies in the world. Whether you have millions in assets or you're just now getting started investing, Joe Garrissey can help you reach your financial goals. Visit backwardsplanningfinancial.com or call Joe Garrissey at 615-767-2555.
The difficulty with taking the miracle that way, the fellow involved was named Legion. It was a guy, not a lady. And the pigs were an unclean animal for the Jews. And when Jesus cast the demons out, if you think of it in terms of a simple wonder worker who's out there stupefying the peasants, and you take it as a petty miracle that way, that whoa, he killed the pigs, then of course I think you've got a point. The miracle is tawdry and overdone if that's all you understand it to be. But the story ends, it's quite striking, with the people in that village couldn't keep this guy bound. He was he lived in the tombs, and when Jesus cast the demons out of him and the pigs were killed, the people begged Jesus to leave that region. They preferred the devil they knew to the devil they didn't know. I think there's a commentary being made on the state of the spiritual health and spiritual vibrancy in Israel at that time. They didn't want Jesus there messing with the arrangements that they had made, with the accommodations they had made. So if you simply assume
with
that...
their demon-haunted world.
Correct. In other words, Jesus was... What Jesus did was he traveled around casting out demons, and what many people don't realize is that demonism, shamanism, this sort of thing that you encounter still in many parts of the world, that sort of thing was banished, exiled, defeated, and overcome precisely by the Christian faith. If you're encountering witch doctors and people who are living in bondage to that kind of thing, whether it's made up as you believe or genuine as I believe, or what is more likely, a mixture of both. I believe that there's a great deal of superstition mingled in with genuine spiritual problems. If you believe that, then you say, let's look at the scoreboard. Let's look at what has happened where the Christian faith has gone. We have been instrumental as Christians in lifting the clouds of superstition. What you glory in, the Enlightenment, I don't think was possible in witchcraft-riddled societies. I think it was dependent on the Christian faith.
Okay. It's my turn to ask a question, isn't it? I think.
Yes.
I'm going to stay on this point too. But by way of preface, Senator John McCain has just nominated as his running mate a woman who attends a church in which spiritual warfare and anti-demon tactics are regularly discussed, has been filmed having hands laid on her by what I would describe as an animist bishop from Kenya. She may describe as a Christian, who talks about the witches he's expelled from his own area of the highlands of Kenya. So how can you say that Christianity has rid us of the nonsensical idea of witchcraft, demonism, and exorcism? To the contrary, it's the reason why these nonsensical, barbaric, primitive ideas survive. Now, I hope I don't take advantage of you if I tell the audience, with your permission,
sure,
of a question I asked you yesterday and the answer you gave me. I asked Douglas Wilson this. Suppose that a soul, I'll call it a soul for his sake, a person is born in Saudi Arabia today into the Wahhabi theocratic society. Would you rather that person became an atheist or joined the majority religion of that state? You want to tell them your answer?
I'd prefer you become an atheist.
Yeah. And I thought it was a very honourable reply on your part, and I want to press it a little bit. Do you believe that Thomas Aquinas, called a saint by the Roman Catholic Church, levitated and flew all around the nave of Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris?
I'm afraid you lost me. I'm a good Protestant.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't believe it either.
Right, yeah.
You don't think that's true? Do you think that Muhammad took a night journey on a horse from the Arabian Peninsula to the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem, and the horse left a hoofprint before rocketing him up to paradise?
I'm not with that one
I
either.
don't think so either.
No.
So here's my question. How can you manage to say that miracles are only true when they're Calvinist? Because it's always seemed to me, as a secularist, never mind an atheist, that either all religions' supernatural claims must be true, or none of them are, my own position, or only one of them is. The least probable position of all.
Right.
The one you've decided to occupy. Why is it that the miracle claims are okay made by Calvinists and not by Muslims, other kinds of Christian or Jews?
Hitchens here speaks of supernatural truth claims. Either they are all true, none of them are true, or my supernatural truth claims are true. That is the dilemma he has set up. You've chosen the least probable, he says. Now, this is a sly little trick that Hitchens pulls here. You see, the fact of the matter is, it is objectively false. But if your defenses aren't up, you might miss it. 2 quick points on this. Number 1, the least probable of the 3 is objectively the claim that they are all true. because each of the world's religions are, in fact, making mutually exclusive truth claims about the nature of the cosmos. Thus, anyone who thinks about this dilemma for more than 10 seconds should be able to deduce that the least probable truth claim is that they're all true. It is logically incoherent from the outset. So that's point number one. And number two, and I really want to hone down on this point, he conveniently excludes his own worldview from scrutiny by saying supernatural truth claims. But the atheist himself is, of course, making supernatural, transcendent truth claims. You see, to deny the existence of God is, of course, itself a metaphysical truth claim, especially while you are still trying to maintain the idea that truth, goodness, and beauty objectively exists apart from God. These are nothing if not supernatural truth claims. So essentially, Douglas Wilson and Christopher Hitchens are in fact making the same claim here within the dilemma that Hitchens sets up. They both believe that their metaphysical truth claims are true and the other ones are false. And now let's continue.
Notice the structure of your argument. The structure of your argument is that...
Glad you think it's got a structure.
Well, it does, and here it is. The structure of your argument is that you're reasoning from the existence of counterfeits to a denial of the genuine article. I believe that there are plenty of spurious Federal Reserve notes printed up by counterfeiters in their basement. And I believe that this assertion that this bogus Thomas Aquinas $20 bill and bogus Islamic flying horse $20 bill does not obligate me in the slightest to deny the existence of genuine currency. I don't see how you can argue from the existence of counterfeits and fakes and knockoffs to a denial of the genuine.
But I wasn't doing so.
You were asking me...
No, I was asking how on what you found. Your assertion that yours is the only true bill.
The ones I believe in, the ones I believe in are the ones I believe in.
Yes. For example, I've spent a lot of time on a small point that I think is a big one. You probably, or some of you will know of the existence of a text called the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion. It was originally fabricated by Christian Russian Orthodox fascists in the pay of the Tsar to try and condemn the Jewish people for a blood libel and a secret government based on conspiracy, and it's now the chief paranoid document on the website of Hamas and Islamic Jihad, and it's had a huge circulation in Christian and Muslim religious circles for a very long time. It's usually described as a forgery. If you've ever read about it, you'll have heard of it as a forgery.
Yeah.
And it may seem to you a pedantic point, but I don't think it is. Whenever I write about it, I say, don't call it a forgery. Why not? A forgery is a copy of a true document. Protocols of the Elders of Zion is not a copy of a true document.
Right.
It is a fabrication. It's a whole cloth hoax. It's a criminal slander invented out of whole cloth. There's nothing forged about it at all. There's no true bill to begin with. Now do you see the distinction?
Yes.
Well, why are your miracles the true bill and the others are all copies of it?
Because they happened. Jesus really did.
All right.
Jesus really did rise from the dead, which I believe on the same basis.
Well, Aquinas believed that.
Sure.
Muhammad believes
the fact
some
that
of that.
Aquinas didn't fly around Notre Dame does not mean that he got everything wrong.
No.
Right. So, I believe that I was not there at the Battle of Waterloo. Didn't see it happen. I accept it on the basis of eyewitness accounts and authorities' eyewitness accounts that I deem to be reliable. I do the same thing with George Washington crossing the Delaware. I do the same thing with the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. Now, I believe that you could generate a whole host of evangelical Protestant miracles that I don't believe in either. I believe that we ought to study it, love the Lord our God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, love the Lord our God with all our brains. We should look at the evidence and make a determination. We shouldn't just say, oh, it's a miracle, it's good, and it serves the cause of the gospel, or it helps keep people in line or helps inspire them. If it's not true, if it didn't happen, we should have nothing to do with it. And I've been in Christian circles for many years, and I've heard all kinds of miracle stories that I don't believe. I've heard probably more miracle stories that I don't believe than miracle stories I do believe. But as a Christian, I don't believe that I can go into the Bible and pick and choose. If Jesus did not rise from the dead, then we of all men are most to be pitied. And so it doesn't matter how socially good it is or bad from your point of view. What matters is the truth. And so when I say I believe this miracle occurred, it has nothing to do with, I don't accept Hume's argument as an absolute, that you can just rule miracles out. I believe on the basis of well-attested miracles with eyewitnesses you believe, that's the most rational thing you can do.
I was about to stop and say no further questions, but it's not fair to the great Scotsman to say that Hume said all miracles could be ruled out. He simply said you have to ask yourself, if you appear to see the laws of nature being suspended in front of your eyes, which is more likely, that they've been suspended in your favor, or that you are under a misapprehension?
Right, and
you're not allowed to appoint your own senses, your own impressions, as the arbiter of the natural order, and that might lead in the end to a dismissal, but it isn't an a priori one.
Sure, and I believe that Joseph, when he found out that Mary, his betrothed, was pregnant, he followed David Hume's advice to the letter. He didn't know what the most reasonable explanation was, and that sort of thing. It's not that in the ancient world, it's not that people didn't know where babies came from. It's not that they didn't know that you couldn't walk on water. It's not that they didn't know that you couldn't change water to wine. They knew that as well as we do.
No, all Joseph knew was who hadn't made her pregnant.
Right.
If we have to be crude about this.
Correct.
And if you were David Hume, you would ask which is more likely, that the fact that he hasn't made her pregnant and she is the result of divine intervention, or that a Jewish girl could tell a fib.
Sure. And Joseph.
Now, of the two, I don't think the latter is overwhelmingly improbable.
Sure. And Joseph was
and
right
since
with
there's
David Hume.
no religion has ever been founded except with the claim that its founder and prophet was born of a virgin. I have the whole list in the front of my book, if anyone. By the way, available at fine bookstores everywhere. I have in the first 2 pages of my book a list. There is no religion from Aztec to Hindu, including Buddhism, where the Gautama is born through a slit in his mother's side, where it doesn't begin with a miraculous birth.
And there's no counterfeit money.
You couldn't be in the religion business without claiming that, especially in the Greater Jerusalem area.
And you couldn't be in the counterfeiting business without green paper and numbers in the corner.
The Quran absolutely attests it. The Quran attests the virginity and motherhood of Mary.
Sure.
It's in the Quran. What could be wrong with that?
Nobody counterfeits brown Safeway shopping bags. They're not worthwhile. It's not worth it to counterfeit them. If something's worthwhile, all right, if you've got a genuine article, then you've got counterfeits.
Okay, now, pretty soon we're going to have to see if we've exhausted the tolerance of our brothers and sisters. But you know what? You remind me of something. Douglas and I had lunch yesterday with Marvin Olasky. Probably some of you know him. He's now the president of the King's College in New York, and was once famed as the head of President Bush's faith-based initiative. Dr. Olasky and I have something in common. We both used to be members of Marxist organizations, and we were chatting a bit about our old allegiances. Now, I remember I.F. Stone saying about Mussolini calling himself a socialist and Hitler calling himself a national socialist. He said, that's a compliment of a kind. Said my old comrade, Red comrade, as he said, nobody bothers to counterfeit bad currency. Well, it turns out that they do.
But not currency believed to be.
It turns out that the ironies of history and the cruelties that reality practice on us as a suffering species. Yes, actually, people will go to great lengths to say, I'd like to deal in this bankrupt currency. It can happen, and it has, as you've just shown.
Yes, people do.
Well, we don't have a chairman, do we? So when do we know when to invite our guests to join us?
When do we know?
I would forego mine for the sake of questioner, if you would.
I'm happy to.
Now, in conclusion, Christopher Hitchens wants to have his cake and eat it too. He wants to say that there is no God, and he wants to say, but you still ought. You ought not to murder. You ought not to enslave. You ought not to steal. But if there is no God, there is no objective standard by which we can judge what is right and what is wrong. There is no standard by which we can judge what you ought to do. If there is no God, it is survival of the fittest. Primate A might prefer if you didn't enslave him, but Primate B wants to enslave him, and he has the power to do it. Who's to say Primate B is objectively wrong? By what standard can you condemn him? Apart from God, there is no good and there is no evil. There is only preference. I think Wilson did a good job of outlining that in this debate. Goodness, truth, and beauty are off limits for the atheist. According to their own worldview, these transcendent virtues cannot exist, at least not objectively so. And anytime the atheist tries to make reference to any sort of objective goodness, truth, or beauty, they are behaving as though they do not believe their own worldview. In fact, they are actually borrowing from the Christian worldview. And so as we wrap up here, my hope and prayer is this, that this debate and this commentary would help equip you for conversations with your unbelieving family and neighbors. In fact, many people don't know this, but Doug Wilson and Christopher Hitchens actually became friends throughout their time debating one another. And why is that? Well, it's because Doug wasn't ultimately trying to win a debate with Hitchens. He was trying to win his soul. He actually loved Hitchens. And in fact, Doug Wilson is one of the last people that Christopher Hitchens reached out to on his deathbed. So, brothers and sisters, yes, go out, be equipped, go destroy the pagan worldviews of unbelievers, but do so while simultaneously offering the gospel with genuine love in your hearts. And do this as you seek to build, defend, and expand the kingdom of our Lord Jesus Christ. And with that, we'll see you guys on the next one.